So, we're into Solitude, retreat and return. What a fantastic way of starting the year. What a place of rest for our souls. And I hope you really appreciated some downtime in social media and all that sort of stuff, that we understand the importance of its communications and some of its storytelling and continuing to promote our purpose and our values. But we went to the dark side of the moon on that one for a couple of weeks, and I thought that was fantastic. And I'm really believing that these practices that we are talking about, practices that Jesus himself modeled and invites us into, are actually becoming an everyday occurrence in your life. There are 9 practices that are part of our spiritual formation heartbeat. It is what we have welded ourselves to as a church, that we actually want to be apprentices of Jesus, that are with him, become like him in order to do the things that he did. Right? And we do that in a large family on a Sunday morning, but in learning communities midweek. And it's essential. Jesus himself did that. He went to the synagogue, we'll see that today, and then he spent time in smaller groups in order that we would be iron that sharpens iron, in order that we would be deep that calls out to deep, in order that the things which are going great in your life may encourage others, and areas that aren't so great in your life can be spoken into and can be blessed by others. And we do this together. One of the key practices that Jesus embodied and that are foundational for us to be with, become like, do as Jesus, is solitude. Neat. And the concept of solitude isn't that it's just something that we run away from and we hide, but it's that we would retreat in order that we would return. And I really wonder if some of our goings are actually weaker than what they could be, should be, or need to be, because we actually haven't spent time refreshing and filling personally with Jesus, quite possibly in some small groups where they can lift up their arms with us. Is that kind of cool? So we've done 3 sessions, and we've actually established the fact that solitude isn't just a private therapeutic practice. All right? It's not just something that is a good psychological technique. If you actually went into the world, you'll find, websites on well-being and mindfulness, and they would all have this stuff in there, but it's actually not just so that you can be a happier person. All right? Go to Bali, braid your hair, fantastic, be a happier person. But this is actually, you all with me? You haven't seen me for a while. We all okay? It's actually so that as we actually retreat, there is a purpose to that. This solitude isn't just sitting and humming to ourselves like a mad person. As I know that solitude, as we'll see, is both a sacred place, but it's also a sacred practice. That isn't just a noun of a chair or a beach. It's actually a verb in which we practice solitude. It's an activity that is intended to actually bring about a greater return in our love of Jesus, in our knowledge of Jesus, in the way that he can make himself known to us, so that he can make himself known through us. Amazing. All good? So we had, I loved Laura's opening, and you see this in our new Abundant Life Church podcast, which Sam puts up every week. That's kind of cool. So Spotify, Apple, you can go and get our podcast. I know we've had them up on YouTube for many a year, and are they still going into that space? They're still YouTubing, right? So if you actually want to look at me, it just blows my mind, you can do that. Or Sam, probably that's probably might be understandable. Gary, definitely. But if you just want to be able to listen to them while you're walking or doing that sort of stuff, our podcast, so Laura opened it, Pastor Sam sort of took us into that space where we're actually going, what do we encounter in this place of solitude? Shock, horror. First of all, it's probably going to be you. It's going to be the noise in your head. It's going to be the questions in your heart. It's going to be holding up a mirror to yourself and going, damn, am I really that ugly? And God's going to say, no, that's actually not who you are. That is how the world sees you. Let me show you another way. Because in this place of solitude, we encounter ourselves. Pastor Gary brought in that we actually encounter our enemy. And there are so many areas of contention for our peace, for our affection, for our attention, for our authority, for where we give our money, for where we give our energy, that we're actually going to find those held up to us in a place of solitude. And none of those are comfortable. None of those are easy. But I've got to tell you, beloved, nothing great ever is. Raising kids is one of the greatest things we'll ever do. And it's just so easy, isn't it? Right? We're just living in this age. We are the first sort of generation on the planet that's actually tried to do spiritual formation with this in our back pocket, pinging and blinking and buzzing. We're the first generation to ever have to do that. So it's not an easy thing that we actually are asked to come into a place of solitude when everything in this world is wound to 11 to get you busy, to get you hurried, to get you distracted. And quite frankly, we embrace that. I know I embrace distraction because the longer I sit with myself, the more I actually get to see the work that is in progress. And so often I go, oh, still so far to go, and I forget, oh, I've come so far. And in solitude, we get to hear the Father's voice. Where are we going today? We're going to look at our encounter with God, and we're going to look at a couple of things. We're going to park on this slide here for a minute, please, Pete. We're going to talk about our desperate need for solitude, solitude's significance, some of the blessings that we find in solitude as we are encountering not just ourselves and our own reflection, not just our enemy and his whispers and lies, but as we're actually sitting with God, some of the blessings that come with that. And then we're going to take a couple of minutes to get practical. You all good? Yeah. There have been some fantastic, when I say fantastic, there have been some horrendous lies told to humanity. There have been some wonderful pranks pulled on society. I like a decent prank. I can sort of go salute that prank, right? One of my all-time favourites happened in 1956 with the Melbourne Olympics. They were doing the Olympic torch run city to city, and when it came to the Sydney leg, 30,000 people from Sydney came out. 30,000 of them came out to see the Olympic torch carried up the steps of Town Hall, right? There was a gentleman and his mates called Barry Larkin, who thought, you know what, as a joke, just a bit of we should fake an Olympic torch run. So they got a chair leg of a table, painted it silver, stuck a jam tin on the top, stuffed it with Barry's undies and soaked it in kerosene and lit it. Out of the crowd. Running up the street. One of them gets so excited and the crowd sort of don't know what to do. He waved his arms around and the undies flew out, caught on fire. They stopped, picked it up, right, did it again. And anyway, Barry ends up running up. The police are shepherding people out of the way. Get out of the way, get out of the way. He's running up. The chair leg is still dripping with silver paint. The mayor of the city, whose name is Pat Hills, goes, the Olympic torch is coming early. He's freaked out, run up to the steps to receive it. Barry runs up, hands him the torch. He receives the torch, and he's so flustered by being out of time, he just receives it and starts going into his opening remarks. 30,000 people. Barry just gets on a train and goes back to Sydney Uni. Next morning, the Dean of Sydney Uni comes out and goes, well done, son. 2 days later, he goes into his exam and there's an exam on, gets a standing ovation as he enters the exam. Consequently, fails the exam, but that's another story. But what a trick to play. Oh, that just makes me so happy in my heart. I don't know why. Maybe I'm sick, pray for me. You're better Christians than I am. But that just thrills me, right? There have been some other tricks, lies played on humanity which actually don't fill my heart with the same level of joy, and in fact actually affected my thinking on my comings and my goings in far more negative ways. One, obviously the greatest trick that the devil ever pulled was that he doesn't exist. One of the greatest tricks the devil ever pulled is that he's actually a little Daffy Duck character. I mean, maybe it's too old for some of our young guys, but Daffy Duck with the devil sitting on one shoulder and an angel sitting on the other. And that he's turned himself into a cartoon character, where he's not that at all. The devil is malignant in his pursuit to see you torn down from anything and everything that could actually resemble the person of Jesus, his goodness, his kindness, and his life in your life. He's desperate to do that. It's not quite so funny. One of the other great lies that has permeated modern society, particularly in the last sort of 70, 80 years, is that we can do life without God. Mark Sayers, in his book, The Non-Anxious Presence, tells a story about the inventing of the new free world. And it happened during World War II. There was a think tank put together. It was called the War and Peace Studies Group. It was a subcommittee of the Council of Foreign Relations, and you had some of the best American economic minds, bankers, academics, media figures, military leaders, and the beginnings of the CIA sat in room in Manhattan and began to dream, while Europe and the Pacific burned, began to dream about how can we reconstruct modern society in the wake of what had been a horrendous 40 years on the planet. You think of World War I, you think of the Great Depression, the Spanish flu, you think of World War II. And they began to dream this up, and they laid the foundations for this modern secular world. They began to emphasise scientific rationalisation, economic interconnectedness, and a healthy sense of scepticism, which all took a world that was quite centralised around the truth of Jesus Christ to that point, and started to say we are sidelining the need for scriptural or divine guidance. Mark Sayers would contend that that was almost the end, the beginnings of what we live in as the American century, and that is actually coming to a close. But what actually happened there in 1940 was it began to say we can begin the world again. It is one of the great tricks, it is one of the great lies. It's not a prank because it's not funny, because it's actually ruined nations, generations, gifts, talents, joy, peace have gone to the grave because we have actually gone, I can do this without God. There was a veneer of nobility to it. It was steeped in the philosophies of Thomas Paine, who was in the 1700s, the father of a couple of different revolutions, but was staunchly against religion. But he actually believed that the ambition was to recreate a just and ordered world that was reminiscent of Eden. It was just, it was peaceful, it was flourishing, it was healthy. But you cannot take God out of the equation. They tried to present an alternative gospel and replace divine guidance with human man-made systems and frameworks. We are going to dovetail this into where is solitude in this, and how does Jesus lead us in this. But we need to understand the context to which solitude and how it invites us to see ourselves, our enemies, and our God is actually in such a contested space. You know that there's not many sermons go by where I don't quote the great theologian Bono. And listening to his one of his Desert Island Discs sort of interviews, he's reflecting on the band U2, and he actually says this. I had to stop and write it down. He says, "I have been constructed." I love that notion. No, I have been sort of randomly put together by cosmic chance. I'm not medieval sludge having a spectacularly good day. I haven't just evolved. I have been constructed in such a way as that I don't really function without other people's help. And he went on to say, I find that quite frustrating at times. And I can deal with that. Anyone who knows, and anyone sits in my office or sits in our staff knows that I need lots of help. I love to externally process. And what do you think about this? And can we do this together? And who can we involve? But there's something in that I believe that what the world has attempted to do is, no, I will do it by myself. And it is stormed around like a 3-year-old with its pants on backwards and different shoes on because I'll do it. And yet we are intended to live just totally not independent, but interdependent and dependent upon the person of Jesus. We have been constructed in such a way that we do not function without God. We've constructed a world where it's cleaner, faster, cheaper, and ask people in Africa how that's actually going for them. We've constructed worlds where technology and education and communication is going great. Ask people who have just lost a child, or going through how am I actually going to navigate these areas in my marriage or with my money. It doesn't matter what systems, what processes, it doesn't matter how good our courts are or our legal system is or how much money we pour into the education system. I'm not saying we shouldn't do any of that. But when we think that we can take our strength, our hope and our health from any of that, as opposed to actually knowing Jesus, then we just can't. We are being pranked. And we don't live in peace or really bearing the fruit and being productive in the way we could. How are we done? Good. All right, so let's have a look at our desperate need for solitude. Can we do this? So we actually have a desperate need for solitude. We understand that the world that we are hurried sick. We understand that there is an antidote for that, like we all lined up to get vaxxed. But yet the Lord says, hey, I can actually give you something which is going to inoculate you against hurried sickness and the demands of time and all this sort of stuff. And it's actually, my way is a better way. And you don't have to take it in the arm, you just have to come and sit in my presence. Solitude, as we've said, is a sacred practice and a sacred space, and it is a deliberate act. And so much of the church has actually gone, oh, someone will do this for me, someone will worship for me, someone will preach for me, someone will pray for the sick. I'm so glad. You know what? I cannot actually remember the last time that someone said, oh, my cousin or my niece or my so-and-so in hospital, can you go and pray for them? With the expectation that they had not started that journey or wouldn't continue it on after I'd gone. You're doing that awesome. You are rising up in the knowledge that no one is here to do it for me. I am intended to be a carrier of God's light and truth, and it's my watch, it's my family, it's my workplace, it's my school, this is my state, and therefore I am actually going to be deliberate with it. That I'm going to be intentional, that I will be sacrificial, that there will be pain, that it will be uncomfortable. But I think as Abundant Life Church we are growing into an awareness that may be uncomfortable, but we're not going to die. That it may actually cost us something, but everything we pay out for his name's sake and for seeing others strengthened or delivered or blessed is going to pour back into our lap. Jesus actually said, anyone who leaves mother's, father's fields or friends for my name's sake will receive back 100-fold in this life. Not just an eternal promise, in this life. The purpose of solitude is that we would initiate and imitate communion with God. Not imitate in a false sense, but that with God is so already wanting this and is so prepared for this with us that we would step into this. And solitude is actually that deliberate sense of us removing external distractions. We have a desperate need for this in our lives. I love what John Mark Hamer says. He says, this is looking at Jesus, looking at me. What a beautiful, easy transaction, as much as it is complicated and is going to take some work. And again, is the upside down kingdom. The first should be last. The greatest should be the least. I have to work at my rest. I have to fight for my peace. They sound like contradictions, but they're not. There is huge transformative power in this place of solitude, in this place of rest and reflection. And I don't need, and I'm not going to give you more stats and more stories. We know it. It started in 1940s when the ripples of anxiety spread out through the world that says, we've just survived another world war and now I'm going to do it for myself. Could there have been anything worse for the world to have escaped that cataclysmic event and then simply robe ourselves with our own sense of righteousness? Could anything have embedded the pain, the grief, and the wrong thinking that would have come out of that global catastrophe more than actually going, I will be my own God? We feel it, we see it. You've stood in shops and heard someone start to argue. You've stood in shops and heard someone chastise their children, and you know what happens in your heart. It's because it's in here and it's out there and it arcs off each other. It's like static electricity. We keep getting shocked by it. We don't need to know why we need it. We just need to know that it's actually there and that we can actually, there is a desperate need for it. I love what one of the desert fathers, Father Amanos says. He says, behold, my beloved, I have shown you the power of silence, how deeply it heals and how pleasing it is to God. For it is through silence that the saints grew, carrying it with them in their hearts. It was because of silence that the power of God dwelt in them And through silence, the mysteries of God were revealed to them. Corinthians tells us he's chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wisdom of the wise. And how like my God to take people like us in a state like this, in a condition like this, in a state like this, to actually use silence to shout to the world. Our God is a good God, and he sits on the throne robed with majesty and power, and there is healing in his hands, and there is truth in his word, and he is so freely available. He says, come home. He is for me and not against me. Let's look at Mark 1, shall we? And let's use the Bible for a second, although I think I've probably quoted the Bible half a dozen times already. In Mark 1, the premise of this, and Mark, as Laura set up for us, I think it takes about an hour and 15 minutes to read the whole way through, and I love Laura's first renderings of Mark uses the word immediately so much. Immediately, quickly, Jesus did, and he's just so excited and overwhelmed by the fact, I can't believe this, and you've got to understand, and this happened just so fast, everything was just going crazy. Jesus is like turning the world upside down. And it's only 16 chapters. It's not a long read, but at the beginning of Mark 1, Jesus has actually gone and he's preached in the synagogue. A guy has stood up and said, what do you want from us, Jesus? And there's a demonic spirit, and Jesus has told the devil to shut up, get out, and everyone's freaked out. And gone, hang on a second, what? Where does this authority come from? We haven't seen this before. We've had people who have trolled through Scripture, and we've done it out of religious duty, but here we actually see the Scriptures coming alive and actually demonstrating their power, their goodness, and their intent for freedom. This has happened. And it says, so this has just happened. As soon as they had left the synagogue, they went with James and John to the house of Simon and Andrew. Simon's mother-in-law, which we came to know as being Peter. His mother-in-law was in bed with a fever, and they immediately told Jesus about her. And so he went to her, took her hand, and helped her up, and the fever left her, and she began to wait on them. We're going to park in this scripture for a minute, Peter. I know there's a second slide. We'll get to that. That evening after sunset, so when Sabbath had finished, all the people had gone to synagogue, they'd gone home, they couldn't do a whole bunch of stuff. And that evening, they got up, they left. The people brought to Jesus all the sick and the demon-possessed. The whole town gathered at the door. That's pretty massive, right? Imagine all of Lauderdale turning up, or all of Howrah, all of, where do you live again? Mount Nelson, all 7 people there. No, I'm joking. And Jesus healed many who had various diseases. He drove out many demons, but he would not let the demons speak because they knew who he was. Can we just stop a sec? I just want to make a few points out of this. I want to let you know that the whole concept of retreat is to return. Okay? And all of my Monty Python fans here, the whole concept isn't run away. Right? Any Monty Python fans here? I'm completely, thank you, there's half of it. All right? The whole concept isn't that we run to church and run away from the world, then come back and pull the covers over our head and go, I hope no one noticed. The whole concept of coming into spaces like this is so that everyone will notice, that every area of your life will take Sunday into your Monday. Jesus valued this gathering. He went every week. He understood the authority of it. He understood the worship of it. He understood the testimony of it. He understood the benefits of it. He did it. He modeled it. He said, do not forsake meeting together. We can be Christians without coming into gatherings like this, but you're going to be weaker than what you need to be. You can survive on bread and water, but your muscles will waste because you're not getting the other proteins and vitamins that you need. We come into this space and we understand that Jesus values it. Value is recognizing the significance, worth, or importance, and then demonstrates it through thoughts, actions, and emotions. When we talk about retreating, it isn't so we can just somehow go off and do our Christian lives all by ourselves. It is intended to be in community. What we see here is we see community moving into the wider community, and then later on we're going to see it flowing back into his still space with God in order that it may step out into the world again. This is the cycle that God has got. Retreat and return. Rest and work. fill up, pour out. I love the fact that we see Sunday meeting Mondays. I love the fact that people actually knew they had a need and were courageous enough to come and ask for it. And if I could hold some smelling salts up to the nose just of the church and go, we are not asking enough. We are not bringing our need enough. We are too proud to come and bow our knee to Jesus and go, I have a need, Father. And I think it breaks his heart. And I think it means that we walk with a weight on our back, a stumble in our step. It's not necessary. And I say that because I preached in this pulpit for 18 years, and I could almost guarantee I could do an altar call for anyone who wants $1 million. There'd be 7 people here when there's 70 people in the room. Because we actually are not courageous enough to be vulnerable. There is something in our hearts that says, what will people think? What do you care? If your children are struggling, your marriage is hurting, you're worried about money, you're not sleeping great, your hips knackered, what do you care what people think? They didn't. They saw Jesus touched this woman. Jesus spoke to that man. Jesus, I need you. Jesus, you're my only hope. We have got hospitals and education. We've got Dr. Google, ChatGPT. What do I need Jesus for? The origins of that are in 1942 in Manhattan. I'll go to the medical industry. I'll go to the pharmaceutical companies. I'll go to Google. I'll get what I need on Amazon. I can get it free delivered in 4 days. I'm not speaking against doctors. I'm not speaking against teachers. I'm not speaking against lawyers. They're all a gift to us. But why would we not ask for help? Why, when we've got prayer cards up there, do we actually only have one slide on a Sunday? We've got greater needs than that. They recognised it. You know why? Because they didn't have all the digital distraction. Those guys weren't Googling, is this demon depression or, you know, all the other things which are going on. We want blessings, but we won't hunger and thirst. I really believe that if we were to come into a place of solitude, if we were coming into a place of waiting, if we were coming into a place of stillness, deliberately blocking out stuff, I almost guarantee, because I know my own personal story, that in a place of stillness, my hunger grows. In a place of stillness, my wanting God grows. You can have as much of God as you hunger for. But we have been drinking from puddles by the side of the road and eating roadkill, satisfying ourselves in the world and not being seated at a banquet table. Choice is ours. And I don't say yours. I'm in this room too. Right? I'm wearing the same earth suit as you. I wish I was wearing Steve Bain's earth suit. It's Friday night. His money's... But I'm living the same life as you, right? That's right. In the waiting, wanting is born. In the waiting, hunger is born. Jesus taught in the Beatitudes, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. Not blessed are those who have had their hunger and their thirst satisfied with the things of the world, but hunger and thirst for mine. And in the waiting, our thirst will erupt. Father, I just want you more. What a great prayer. Father, I want to hunger for you more. He loves that prayer. And then he gets to step in and start satisfying us. And these guys knew that. We all okay? All right, so let's get into the bit more of the solitary stuff. Very early in the morning, thank you. Oh, look, how good is Pete Dishington, by the way? A round of applause for Pete. Come on. You guys in the sound desk and on the screens and stuff do a fantastic job. Anyone remember the overhead projector days? All right, okay, so I know it's just they just stand up there. Remember when you used to get the slides wrong and your neck would burn as everyone was going, you just put the wrong word? Anyway. Pete, we appreciate you, and in fact the whole team, so thank you. Very early in the morning, while it was still dark, Jesus got up, left the house, and went off to a solitary place where he prayed. Where he didn't play on his phone, check his Clash of Clans, okay, check the weather, find out what's going on in American politics, all of which I've been terribly guilty of. Okay, do you feel better? That was quite cathartic for me. Where he prayed. Simon and his companions went to look for him, and when they found him, they exclaimed, made a big deal of it, "Everyone is looking for you." And Jesus replied, "Let us go somewhere else to the nearby villages so I can preach there also. This is why I have come." So he travelled throughout Galilee, preaching in their synagogues and driving out demons. Let's just hold here for 1 second. This word solitary is the Greek word eremos. And I know you all get so excited when we start pulling out Greek and Hebrew words, and we all think we're smarter than what we really are. But the word eremos is intended to actually highlight a much broader understanding of this is just a place where Jesus went by himself. He withdrew. It was a space away from the distractions. It was open and it was quiet. So when they write a solitary place, what that actually meant in that Greek language, it had such a broader context. It actually had such a broader meaning. It elicited such a different word picture than what we go solitary place. Is that okay? These solitary places are mentioned throughout Scripture a number of times. In Matthew 4, Gary actually spoke into this in his encountering the enemy. Jesus was led, after Jesus had been baptized, the Spirit of the Lord, like a dove, came and descended and landed upon Jesus. And there is a Spirit that is in us. There is a Spirit which is on us. The Spirit that is in us is for us. The Spirit that is on us is for others. Jesus didn't need the Spirit in him, but the God came and put the Spirit on him so that all would see. Even in that place, he was led by the Spirit into the eremos, the wilderness. In Luke 5, it tells us Jesus often withdrew to the lonely places, to the eremos, and he prayed. And they're places that represent testing. They're places which represent preparation. They're places which represent spiritual refinement. If you want some homework, go and wait in the Lord and talk to him about saying the solitude, the eremos of the Garden of Gethsemane the night before he was crucified, and wait in that space and say, Father, in my sanctified imagination, lead me into what went on in that place for you in preparation for the crucifixion. It wasn't an easy place. Actually said he was in such anguish that he sweated blood. It is a registered medical condition that under intense pressure, the capillaries in your skin can break and it can mingle with sweat and we can sweat blood. That's the sort of pressure that he was under in the eremos place. It's not just watching butterflies. It's not some spiritual Woodstock. And in Mark 1:35, very early in the morning, he got up, left the house. And I'm not suggesting you have to leave the house, but leave a place of where you are, got jobs to do and things that you need, and move into a place where a solitary place where we can pray. Before we look at the solitary place, can we deal with the daily demands? Can we actually see what Jesus had come from? He'd come from preaching in the synagogue. He'd come from a fairly intense night of ministry, and he was going back into the daily demands. This is the retreat to return. We retreat doesn't mean you're going to come back and your to-do lists or your bills or that meeting doesn't take place anymore. There is still a daily demand. Everyone is looking for you. There is a pressure on our lives that we so desperately need to be grounded and focused and entwined into Jesus, because it's not just your daily demands, but it's your past mistakes and your future fears which are waiting for you when you get back. It's the anagram of that. Pete Scazzaro says, Jesus may be in your heart, but your grandpa is in your bones. The way that you deal with dilemma or lack or pain has actually been taught to you by your family, often over generations. This is how you deal with it. Jesus can be in your heart, but your family of origin lives in your bones. And the role of discipleship, apprenticeship, is to get more of Jesus into your bones. It actually moves us, this everyone is looking for you, moves us into anxiety. We are living in an incredibly anxious world, a world which demands us to react to their need in the same way as they present it to us. Everything's wrong, everything's bad, oh my gosh, I'm going to respond in the same emotional way. Look at the way Jesus responds from being in this solitary place. Your world is going to come to you, your classmates are going to come to you, your teachers are going to come to you, your kids are going to come to you, and they actually want you to respond to them in the same emotional anxiety as they are carrying to you. But we need to be able to step into a place where we actually don't shrink from the power of the gospel, we actually breathe out the power of the gospel. Steve Cuss says in his book, Managing Leadership Anxiety, my favourite reading of the last couple of months, says anxiety shrinks the power of the gospel because it presents a false gospel. It presents a gospel of self-reliance rather than reliance on God. You're picking up a theme this morning? Yeah. From Manhattan to my heart, I'm trying to rely on the things that I can do, but when I retreat, there is still a job to do, but I come back to that job no longer anxious, but present to the power of God. You all with me? Yeah. All right. So let's move on. Let's look at the significance of solitude then. Jesus went into an empty place. How are we going? Oh my gosh, my time's gone. I'm going to do this do it a bit faster. If you listen to the podcast, you can listen in double time. I actually had a friend who listened to the John Mark Comer book, The Relentless The Relentless Elimination of Hurry. They listened to that in double time. I'm not quite sure they really got the true meaning. But anyway, the significance of solitude. Solitude actually brings us into a place where we can encounter God. We see it happening with Moses. We see it happening with Elijah. Jesus himself did it, and he promises that if you come into this space, I will meet you there. Now, let me put a caveat out there. There are more days in my times of solitude where I come away and Karen goes, how was your time with the Lord? And I go, I got in the way, not sure. I got caught up worrying about other stuff. I chased butterflies as opposed to just being really present. Right? That happens. And we have mercy and we return. And we go back to that place of solitude. We go back to that chair. We go back to that bench. We go back to that beach day after day after day after day after day. Because when you get there and the next thing you find yourself just in the presence of God, tears streaming down your face as he affirms to you your sonship or your daughtership, as you get to see that the sins and the shame that you thought were so devastating to you and everybody else around you, he's actually dealt with, and you walk away free. And you just get those moments. They are so worth it. Yeah. Okay, so it's a place of encounter with God. There's a place in this space, as Gary talked about, is testing and transformation. Israel spent 40 years in the wilderness. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness. We can't spend 4 minutes sometimes, but let's practice. Because it's a place where we can be tested and we can be transformed. We find that the significance of it is that it is a place where we can rest and we can we can rest and be renewed. It sustains us. It revitalizes us. We've got the archery centre is just over the back here, and I walk our dog there, most days, and you actually walk through that, and the ground is so dry that it's got these massive cracks in it. And it's got so dry that the earth has opened up as it's sort of shrunk in on itself, and the grass has all died. You go through that when there has been a major downpour, and all those cracks have all come back together again as the water has soaked in and actually brought that cracked, dry place. It's rested and it's renewed. This place of solitude is a place where we actually learn dependence upon God. I can't do this on my own. I do not have enough money. I do not have the intelligence or the wisdom or the tools. You and you alone can do this for me. Complete reliance on him. And Jesus did this over and over again. And again, I would lead you back to the Garden of Gethsemane for your homework. I don't know how I'm supposed to do this, Father. Please, if is there some other way, take this cup away from me. And he became so reliant on the Father, up until the point where his Father took his hand off him. So that's the significance of solitude. Let's have a quick look at the blessings found in solitude. I love this. In this place of solitude, we get to look back, we get to lean in, and we get to look forward. This place of solitude in Mark 1:35, the scholars have actually gone and mapped where Jesus would have actually gone and sat. He would have left Simon Peter's house and he would have climbed up a hill just outside the village, and it's overlooking what they call Tabgha. And from Tabgha, he could actually see the Sea of Galilee, and he could see the town of Capernaum, where so much of his work was actually going to take place. He could actually look back on yesterday. Far out, what a day. That dude in church where the demon came out. Did you see the look on Bill's face? It was flipping hilarious. That was awesome. And he got to sit with the Father and look back. Sit with the Father, and not for Jesus, but certainly for me, certainly for you. For Jonah, whose new song this morning just went off, he gets to sit and look back and go, Father, would you please take away from me pride? Because that was your song. I was just the conduit of it. Thank you that it actually touched people's hearts. Thank you that the Holy Spirit, you came and sang alongside of me during that song. But Father, I don't want to steal any of your glory from you. When we look back on what was, Jesus was able to look back on a night full of miracles and deliverances, and look back and celebrate. And as we sit with the Father and look back, I can promise you this, He is not going to make you sit and look back and go, see that? That was pathetic. Can you imagine the voice of God saying that to you? You remember when you said that? I was so embarrassed by you, Matt. Is that the voice of God? You should be ashamed of yourself. It is not my Father's voice. Nowhere in Scripture, nowhere in my engagements. He will challenge me. He will say, when you said that, reacted like that, told that joke, that happens all the time. Let's have a chat about that. Let's talk about your identity. Let's talk about your purpose. Let's talk about what was happening in your build up to that. I thought you were getting a little bit this and a little bit that. And I go, oh yeah, thank you, I already was. And we look back on that, and He teaches me and He leads me, or He says, well done. That's probably the harder one for me. I've actually learned to sit under His disciplining hand. For me, I've actually got to learn to sit under the hand of celebration for me. I love you. Really? You did that so well. I find that really hard. I don't know about you. Everyone goes, oh, you're so flopping on yourself. No, I'm sitting with the Father, not before you. And Dad starts to tell me, oh, Matt, that was a brilliant. I love that point. You're so funny. You're looking good in those jeans, Matt. I don't know if you'd say that, but anyway. So he gets to look back. He gets to look, he gets to lean in, and he gets to hear these things, and he gets to get truth, and he just gets to enjoy the presence. We understand that Jesus is his own reward. We are looking for all these blessings and all these breakthroughs and all these benefits. Jesus is his own reward. And when you've met with Jesus and you've had time with Jesus and you've heard his voice, everything else on this planet, the wealth of Elon Musk, or the lifting the trophy, or the having the children, or walking down the aisle, as beautiful it's going to be, fades into insignificance as I turn my eyes upon Jesus and look full in his wonderful face. The things on earth, they take their place. I recognize what's more important, but so many of us approach Jesus for what can you do for me and what have you done for me lately? And that doesn't send a fly as easily. We get to lean in. We get to rest with him and recognize you are everything. What more could I want? You've got the authority, you've got the power, you've got the goodness, you've got the kindness. I can ask. You mean I can ask for anything? You mean I can sit with you and literally ask that my knee would be better, or that I'd find a car space this morning, or I would know what to do? Because then from that leaning in, Jesus got to, from that Tabgha, he got to look forward. He got to look forward down into Capernaum and down into the Sea of Galilee and its shores, where he would continue to call people to join him, where he would feed 5,000. He got to look out onto the lake he would walk on the water with. He got to look forward to these things. Now, I'm not entirely sure he got absolutely every day downloaded with a full blueprint. There were still some things that took Jesus by surprise. So still some stuff that in that stillness and in that relationship, he still had the presence to be able to go, whoa. Remember the centurion? He exclaimed, I haven't found this guy's faith. Check out the faith of this centurion. Unbelievable. Shocked him. The kiss of Judas. You betrayed me with a kiss, Judas, with a kiss. Shocked him. He didn't see everything. It's not some magical thing, right? It's not some blueprint. It's not going to just appear with alerts on your phone. Caution, boss on his way, looking cranky. Right? Don't spend that money. It's not going to come up with alerts on your phone, but it does enable us to say, this is going to be a great day. And you know what? What happens to me more than often, and I probably should be getting ready to close, but I actually get to sit with the Father and go, there is, and this is my complaint, and Karen picks me up on all the time, it's just too much to do today. I don't know how I'm supposed to do everything. I've learned to go, I get to do all this. There is so much here, Father. I just trust you with this day. I look forward into this day. And you know what I do? I turn up and emails have been answered. And people have said, I've already done this for you. Or I've been meaning to call someone and they text and go, hey, I've just been thinking of you. And you go, wow. And all this, and I get to then look back and go, yeah, I prayed for that this morning. I waited upon you for that this morning. You've made a way, or you've opened a door, or you've spoken a word, or you've prepared my heart for challenge, all from a solitary place. All right, so I'm totally done and I've cooked my time. But Isaac, you're going to come and bring some Holy Spirit keys for us. Thank you. We're going to take communion. And the team's just going to hand communion out. Isaac's going to play for us. Sam's going to come and close. But I would so encourage you that this booklet that we've got here about spending a day with Jesus, that in our practicing the way groups, in our learning communities, there is avenues to talk about these sorts of things, share ideas. How do you do this? How don't you do this? Even just, how people have put certain silences on their phone for certain periods of time, what spaces have become meaningful to them. Some people will go, I just can't do it. I've just got to have music going on in the background. That was my initial experience. I've always got to have worship music going on, and that would just take me into the presence of the Lord, and that's wonderful. But then we actually get through practice, we go, you know what, there's even times when we can actually sit in silence. One of the things that I've been doing is actually lighting a candle. I've got an office, I've got a lovely chair, I light a candle, and I simply sit and hold the candle. I go, come Holy Spirit, and it's just a signal to the dawn. The light of the Lord is here. It keeps me focused, and when I start to get distracted, there's a candle. Now hang on a second, I'm here for Jesus. There comes points in time when I realise I've been distracted for a couple of minutes, and I blow the candle out and I move on with my thoughts or my to-do lists or my emails or whatever it is. But that candle really centres me, really calms me down, really gives me something to focus on as a representation of who I'm there to meet with and who actually wants to meet with me. There's so many different tools about how you enter into solitude. But my first one this morning is, what we hold in our hands now is what Jesus actually asked to do in remembrance of him. Spilt my blood for your sins, that it is washed clean. I broke my body to make a way for you physically, emotionally, mentally, into this world. You could do this every morning. You need to take this and take communion every morning. You could do that and remember him. Remember his benefits. Remember his blessings. Remember what his blood has bought for you. Remember what his body, broken, has opened up whole. We do this in remembrance of him. I'm going to ask Isaac to play for a minute or two. Sit in a practice time of solitude. Nice and still. It's only be a minute or two. It's going to feel like forever for some of us. Not going to be long enough for others. And go and do some more time this afternoon. Till then, God bless you.